Okay, Greed by Stroheim. For a while now, I've said that this is one of my favorite silent films of all time, and that Stroheim was almost my favorite director of the silent era. I see no reason not to still feel that way. Greed is a film which you can just sit back and relish in the production of every available scene at least. The missing footage from Greed is a wretched and cruel reality, and so even viewing what is available feels wounded, abridged. I wonder, though I suspect it possibly could, whether Greed as an 8-hour epic would be as enrapturing as a compilation of the available footage at 2 to 3-ish hours. A certain portion of the 4-hour reconstruction is told in stills. Greed was an earlier silent film I saw in my own lifetime, and was one of the first silent films I named my favorite silent film. The first was probably Metropolis, quite predictably. At a certain point it became Murnau's Nosferatu, and I don't know if anything ever really shifted that for me. I'm not assuming any title has done. Greed feels especially like an ancient tragedy to us today, as Stroheim had hoped it would be considered, as we are now not only 100 years removed from the release of this feature, but over 115 years since the events of the film's plot, which begins in the year 1908. So Greed appears to us not as a struggle of human beings at the early 20th century, reduced to the turmoil of ancient Greek despairs, old biblical warnings, and even Mesopotamian psychological anguish, but is simply another story from the depths of human past. Players framed against a desert, seeking to murder for the assurance of material comfort in the mortal world. For us, in a time so technologically detached from 1908, that year may as well be 1908 AD or 1908 BC. What Griffith attempted in Intolerance, or the tragically untimely Thomas Ince in Civilization, or even what the Soviets like Eisenstein, Dovzhenko, or Vertov attempted, trying to change, raise the consciousness of the world via the magic of this new medium, spreading the great messages of the great texts, ancient religious scripture, Abrahamic-inspired moral philosophy, or the existential polemics of great 19th century authors. A medium which only needed some transcripts to be translated, the rest would speak, well, or not, for itself. And maybe Stroheim's was the most effective of all. However many reels 9 hours would have been difficult to get it across the globe, but even if 4 hours of it were available, and if anyone was willing to screen it to those who weren't cynical, nihilistic about human nature to the point of wanting to spit before the screen, I like to think that Greed would have given them hope. And perhaps during the Roaring Twenties, Greed was 10 years too early and could have been screened to uplift those in need of raised spirits during the much more difficult and hope-hungry 1930s. In all this species' faults, the fact that one human being devoted so much time and energy and resources to distill that we ought to love one another, show each other an equal amount of respect, not seek higher status over others, and not lord others into our own control or possession, it does move me. Someone tried to pull on the reins. I wish it had worked. I think all of us in the present might feel, or unknowingly feel, slightly similarly. One cannot help but observe nowadays how Trina is assessed by both McTeague and Scholler as an object that rightfully belongs to them, an object of their greed, and how the film's definition of greed extends beyond a want to hoard one's own material possession or other people's possessions, but other people themselves, as well as other people's behaviours. Trina, a seemingly wholesome character, leaves Scholler only from what is inferred because he permits her being committed with McTeague instead, and didn't spend the $5,000 probably because she wanted to save it for when McTeague was in a very serious emergency, and in this respect she was greedy. She wanted to spend the money when it was truly needed on someone she loved, rather than on others, or on what they both needed in the present. McTeague couldn't comprehend that, unlike money, your lawfully wedded wife doesn't just do and go as you direct it. It has agency, and maybe if he had tried to understand meaningfully why she didn't want to spend the $5,000, he might have appreciated her reasoning sincerely. Greed also makes you think, now more than anything else, almost, how miserable the world was, or certainly could be, in 1908, even in what is now considered the developed world. Now situations like that seen in this film's narrative are probably way more excruciatingly common than they should be, compared with a world which is supposed to have, or once attempted to have, social safety nets, affordable medical care, an assurance or an ability to provide reasonable and secure housing, and a path to either employment or an emergency stream of income between employment or for when one is unable to participate in a workforce due to circumstances out of their control. If that sounds utopian to you, you must have a fairly limited imagination. What sounds utopian to me is a lot more ambitious than that. It includes woolly mammoths. We could use some woolly mammoths, I think. No, I don't think the former qualifies as utopian. As idealism, sure, yes, but I don't see that as a prerogative. I'm into damage control for this species, and I feel as though more life is a jungle, roll back the prosperity, and some people might deserve to suffer. Politics are just going to make things worse. I'm for minimization of suffering. And so is everyone else remotely sane, even if we disagree on what to do to achieve that or what that would even entail in the first. Actually, the more you look into why we cannot have these relatively basic and seemingly affordable needs, not even wants actually, the answer, as it turns out, as it always was, as Stroheim insisted it might always will be, and the reason his film was ultimately cut up too, it was devastatingly greed.